I never imagined anything would happen between us. He was my father-in-law, my wife's father. But when he came to stay for a few nights, everything shifted. The silence between us started to feel like something more. And then it happened. Late at night, under the low kitchen lights, he kissed me. His hands touched my skin, my back pressed against the fridge. I should have stopped it, but I didn't, because deep down, I didn't want to. What started as a simple visit became one of the most dangerous and electrifying nights of my life. Let me take you back to when it all began. I'd always felt something off about Thomas. Not in an obvious way. He wasn't rude or cold, or the kind of man who barked from behind a newspaper. No, it was more subtle than that. He was too controlled, too quiet. He watched people the way a sculptor studies marble, not with affection, but with careful judgment. So when he showed up at my door that rainy afternoon, suitcase in hand, hair damp from the storm, I froze for a second before stepping aside. "Diana didn't tell you?" he asked, brushing rain off his collar. I blinked, caught off guard. "Tell me what?" "That I'd be staying here a few days," he said. "She mentioned it," I replied, even though she hadn't. I forced a polite smile as I took his coat. "But it's no problem." He stepped inside, wiping his feet, eyes scanning the living room. His gaze landed on the wedding photo still on the mantel. Diana in her dress, me in my suit, both of us smiling like we believed it all. He stared at it a moment, face unreadable. "She left for that yoga retreat this morning," I added, trying to fill the space. "I thought you'd be going with her." "I don't do yoga," he said flatly, stepping past me, "and I needed time away from the city." That was Thomas, sharp, brief, precise. I offered tea. He accepted without much interest. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, cups in hand. The quiet clink of porcelain was the only sound between us. He looked older than I remembered. Not frail, just worn. Still had that strong jaw, thick silver hair, broad shoulders. His gray eyes didn't wander much, but when they did, they landed on me. "You working from home this week?" he asked, his voice low, steady. "Yeah," I said, sipping slowly. "My studio's on pause for the holidays, so it's just me, and now you." He nodded, his eyes lingering a moment. I stood in the kitchen, hands on the counter, doing nothing. Just breathing. He hadn't been in this house since our wedding. That day, he'd shaken my hand. Instead of hugging me, he said I had a strong grip. It was the most affection he'd ever shown me. Later, I heard the shower running. I didn't mean to notice how long it lasted. I didn't mean to picture the water sliding down his back either, but I did. Dinner was quiet. I made pasta. He nodded in approval, then ate like he was refueling, not dining. He asked about my work again, what kind of art I was doing now, if I still painted people. I told him I'd moved on, more abstract installations now. Less about likeness, I explained, more about mood, space, the feeling it gives you. "That's what people say when they don't want to explain what it means," he replied. Not cruel, just plain. I laughed, because he wasn't wrong. When the rain picked up again after dark, the house started to feel smaller. The windows fogged. The air turned cool. I offered him a glass of wine. He declined. then helped himself to a whiskey from the shelf. Didn't ask. I let him. We ended up in the living room again. He took the armchair. I curled into the couch, one leg tucked beneath me. We didn't talk much, but the silence didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. Just strange, tuned in, aware. At one point, I caught him watching me. Not casually, not by accident. His eyes drifted from my face down to my neck, then to the hand holding my glass. I felt heat rise in my throat, pretended not to notice. He looked away. "I never really got to know you," he said suddenly, "even after the wedding." "You didn't seem interested," I replied. Before I could stop myself, he gave a faint smirk. "Fair enough." There was a pause. The storm outside cracked like tension splitting open. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, then leaned forward just slightly. "Why'd you marry her?" The question hit me like a cold gust through an open window. I stared at him, uncertain if it was a challenge or a trap. "Because I loved her," I said softly. "Still do." "Do you?" he asked, eyes locked on mine. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I did. We sat there, caught in a moment, our eyes holding, the storm rising around the house like a warning. He didn't say anything else, just stood, finished his drink, and walked toward the guest room. Her favorite morning playlist were gone. In their place, silence. But it wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. Then I heard footsteps. Thomas appeared in the doorway, already dressed, hair still damp from the shower, a crisp white button-up, sleeves rolled to the elbows, black slacks, barefoot. His eyes met mine for a brief moment before he moved past me, grabbed a mug from the shelf, like this was his home, not mine. "Coffee?" I asked, pouring mine. "Black," he said. I handed it to him. Our fingers brushed. Intentional or not, I couldn't tell. He didn't flinch. Neither did I. We stood there in silence, sipping. The tension from the night before hadn't faded. It had settled in, like fog in the corners of the room. "I forgot how quiet this place is without her," he said finally. I gave a soft laugh. "Yeah, she fills the house, doesn't she?" He nodded once, sipping without looking at me. We moved to the living room, returning to the same seats as the night before. Me on the couch, him in the chair. But this time, the air between us felt different, like the rules had shifted when we weren't looking. "I didn't mean to upset you last night," he said. "You didn't." You hesitated. I looked at him, raising my eyebrows. "You asked a heavy question." "I've asked worse," he said, with a faint smirk. Silence returned, but it wasn't awkward. It was cautious, curious, like we were circling something neither of us wanted to name. He glanced at the bookshelf behind me, then pointed toward one of the canvases stacked in the corner. "Yours?" "Yeah, still working on it." He stood, walked over, and studied the painting. It was abstract, layers of slate, burgundy, and rust, built up in thick textures. I watched his eyes move across it slowly, like he was reading something I hadn't meant to write. His hands twitched slightly, like he wanted to touch the canvas. "What is it?" he asked. "I'm not sure yet," I said. "It's still coming." He turned to me. "Or maybe you just don't want to say." There it was again, that uncanny way he had of cutting straight through to something I didn't want to admit. He stepped closer, now standing just behind the couch. One hand rested lightly on the backrest. "You always get this nervous when someone pays attention to you?" he asked, voice low. I looked up at him slowly. "Only when it's you." The air stilled. His eyes searched mine, but he didn't step away, didn't blink. His fingers curled slightly against the fabric, You should finish the painting, he said, barely above a whisper. I think you know exactly what it is. Then, without waiting for a reply, he turned, walked to the guest room and shut the door. I sat there for a long time, my coffee. The steady rasp of grit on wood helped quiet my thoughts, until I heard the door creak behind me. Thomas stepped in, arms crossed. Want help? You do this kind of stuff often? I built my own desk when I was 23, he said, walking over. No YouTube tutorials back then. I chuckled and handed him a sanding block. He took it without hesitation, standing beside me at the workbench. We worked in silence, the way some men communicate, with hands, with breath, through an unspoken rhythm. His shoulder brushed mine now and then. Neither of us acknowledged it. You really think I'm nervous around you? I asked suddenly. He didn't stop sanding. I think you're not sure what to do with how you feel. I swallowed. And what feeling is that? He finally looked at me. Close now, closer than before. I don't know, he said, but I think you've stopped pretending it's not there. We stood in it, whatever it was, for one long, breathless beat. Then he stepped back, set the block down. I'll make dinner tonight, he said. You've hosted enough. I let him, not because I was tired, but because I didn't know how to keep pretending anymore either.
That night, I watched him cook. He moved with quiet confidence, grating garlic, flipping chicken in the pan, pouring a second glass of wine without asking. I sat at the counter, saying nothing, just watching the rise of steam, the way his forearms flexed as he worked. We ate on the couch again, plates balanced on our knees. The TV was on, volume low, but neither of us was really watching. Halfway through the meal, he said, I don't think Diana knows who you are. I turned to him, frowning. What do you mean? I mean, he said, setting his plate aside, I don't think she ever really tried to. Not fully. I didn't know what to say, because part of me agreed, and part of me hated that I did. He leaned back, one arm resting along the top of the couch, fingers barely behind my shoulder. You've been patient, he said. Careful, measured, but I see the way you look at me. I froze. He looked straight ahead at the screen, voice calm, and I looked back. The room wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, like we were both breathing in the same realization. I stood first, needing air, needing space. I mumbled something about cleaning up. He didn't stop me. But when I passed him to grab the dishes, his hand brushed mine. Firm, brief, unmistakably intentional. We didn't speak of it, not out loud, but the walls around us had shifted again. And somewhere in that quiet kitchen, I knew this wasn't just a temporary visit anymore. Something else had entered, and there was more yet to come. I didn't sleep that night. Not fully. I lay in bed with the covers pulled high, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow, hypnotic circles. Somewhere outside, a branch knocked against the side of the house, in a steady rhythm. At some point, I thought I heard floorboards creak outside my door. But when I opened it, there was nothing, only shadows and silence. By morning, Thomas was already outside in the garden. I found him shirtless, sweat gleaming on his back, as he trimmed a stubborn branch off the old mango tree. His hands moved with a practiced calm, muscles shifting under skin that had weathered time but not surrendered to it. The air was still damp from last night's rain, and sunlight streamed through the leaves in broken shafts of gold and green. I watched him longer than I should have. When I finally stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee, he was wiping his brow with the inside of his arm. I handed him a cup. Our fingers touched, brief, warm, unmistakable. He didn't pull away, neither did I. Didn't realize I was making a mess out here, he said after a sip, nodding toward the branches scattered across the lawn. You're not, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Honestly, it needed it. We always talk about pruning the trees, but never get around to it. You keep watching me. The words sliced through the morning calm, clean and undeniable. I opened my mouth, but nothing clever came out. I wasn't. He turned to me, eyebrows raised in quiet amusement. I sighed, defeated. You've just been different. Not what I expected. That got He gave a faint smirk. And what exactly did you expect? I don't know, I admitted. More military, less. I hesitated, then exhaled. Less human. He let out a low chuckle. That's what Diana used to say. Said I was built out of stone. You still kind of are, I said quietly. And yet, he murmured, eyes meeting mine again, you're still watching. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried weight, something unspoken but understood. He took another sip of coffee, then gestured toward the canvas I'd left propped in the sunroom. You painting again? A little, I said, just trying to get back into it. He nodded, then looked out at the mango tree again. Diana says you used to be louder, more expressive. I let out a soft laugh. She exaggerates. I don't think she does, he said, his voice even. I think you've just learned how to shrink yourself. The words stopped me cold, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I'd felt it for a long time, quietly folding pieces of myself down to fit inside someone else's frame. Thomas didn't press the point. He just turned and walked back inside, leaving me with my thoughts and the half-pruned tree. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. I wandered from room to room, starting projects I didn't finish, lingering in doorways for no reason at all. His voice echoed in my mind. You've learned how to shrink yourself. It wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. That evening, I made dinner again, just roasted vegetables and grilled chicken. Simple. We sat at the dining table for the first time since he arrived. The steady hum of the ceiling fan and the soft clink of forks filling the space between us. I'm leaving tomorrow, Thomas said casually, cutting into a piece of chicken without looking up. I paused. Why? He glanced at me then, expression unreadable. You know why. I stared at him, the food forgotten. So you're running away? I'm trying not to ruin my daughter's marriage, he said evenly. I sat back, stunned. The air around us felt heavier, thicker, but his tone never wavered. Calm, controlled, always. I didn't come here for this, he continued, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel it. His eyes stayed locked on mine. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at me? He asked. The way I catch myself looking back? I wanted to answer, but I stood, gathered our plates, my heart pounding in my ears. In the kitchen, I moved slowly, deliberately, needing space, needing air. But he followed. He came to stand beside me at the sink, close, not touching, but near enough to shift the atmosphere completely. I focused on the dish in my hand, washing it like it mattered, pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't feel the pull between us, like a live wire humming just beneath the skin. Then his hand brushed mine. Not clumsy, not accidental, and it stayed there, just a second too long. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Eventually, he stepped back, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'll turn in early, he said, his voice back to its usual calm. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He left the kitchen without another word, and I stayed there, standing at the sink long after the water had gone cold. Later that night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush idle in my mouth, and I caught myself wondering what it would feel like to kiss him, to taste the whiskey I'd seen him sip, to trace There was a crease at the corner of his mouth, the kind that only appeared when he smirked. I hated that I wanted to know it better, hated even more how real that desire had become. When I finally climbed into bed, I left the hallway light on, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because some part of me still hoped he might come down that hall. He didn't. but something had already crossed a threshold, and I knew we couldn't keep pretending much longer. I didn't hear him leave the guest room. The house had gone still, that eerie, suspended silence that only comes right before something irreversible. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, leaning against the counter, a half-empty glass of wine in my hand. The lights were low, only the under-cabinet bulbs casting soft golden shadows across the tile. I hadn't turned on any music. Didn't need to. My thoughts were loud enough. That's when I felt him behind me. I didn't turn around. I just knew. "You're not sleeping," he said quietly. "Neither are you," I whispered back. I heard the soft creak of the floorboards as he stepped closer. Still, I didn't turn. I stared into my wineglass, watching it swirl in the low light. "Do you want me to go back upstairs?" he asked. I finally turned, slowly. He was standing just a few feet away, still wearing the same dark gray shirt from dinner, now untucked, top button undone, hair slightly tousled, eyes steady. "No," I said. "I don't." The silence that followed was thick, loaded with everything we hadn't said, trembling with possibility. He stepped forward, then again, until we were toe-to-toe in the middle of the kitchen. The hum of the fridge the only sound between us. "I don't know what this is," I said softly, "but I'm not pretending anymore." His hand came up slowly, fingertips brushing the side of my face, like he was giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. "I've wanted to do this since the second night," he said, barely audible, even though I knew I shouldn't. I nodded, breath caught in my throat. "I know." His lips were on mine before I even saw him move. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was slow, measured, like he'd imagined it 100 times and didn't want to get a single part wrong. One hand slid around the back of my neck, anchoring me. My hands clung to his shirt instinctively, fingers twisting in the fabric, like it was the only thing keeping me upright. We broke apart just long enough to breathe. Then it happened again. More urgent this time. Less fear. More hunger. His mouth claimed mine, then softened again, teasing, retreating, returning. I pressed him back against the wall beside the fridge. The cold metal hummed at our sides. His breath hitched when my thumb brushed along his jaw, over the coarse stubble I'd only noticed in passing before. "You should stop me," he whispered against my lips. "I don't want to." "You should anyway." I leaned in, resting my forehead against his, "then stop me." But he didn't. He pulled me closer. We didn't make it to the bedroom. Somewhere between the second kiss and the third, my wineglass clinked softly against the counter. His hands slid under my shirt, slowly, carefully, like he was still convincing himself this was real. My heart was pounding so loud, I could barely hear him breathe. We moved through the dark kitchen like it was unfamiliar terrain, like we had to map it with our bodies. When he lifted my shirt over my head, he paused. His eyes searched mine in the dim light, looking for hesitation, for regret. There was none. I kissed him again, deeper this time, and that was all the answer he needed. We didn't rush. We let it unfold, slowly, silently, in the stolen space between sighs and half-whispered names. The weight of what we were doing pressed in from all sides, but it didn't stop us. If anything, it made everything feel sharper, more alive. Every kiss was a rebellion, every touch, a confession. And then, we were no longer two. Later, we sat on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, sweat cooling on our skin. We didn't speak. We just breathed, in sync, staring at the far wall, as if we were too afraid to look at each other. I turned first. He was already watching me. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said quietly, "but it did." He nodded. "So, what now?" He leaned his head back, closing his eyes for a moment. "Now, we carry it." A long silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, but filled with everything else. "I should go upstairs," he said eventually, reaching for his shirt. "Yeah," I murmured. "Probably." He stood, buttoned his shirt slowly, then looked down at me one last time. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Just keep it quiet, okay?" I gave a small nod, and then he was gone. I stayed there for a while, sitting in the quiet, bare-chested and dizzy, his taste still lingering on my lips. The floor was cold beneath me, but my skin still burned. When I finally stood, I didn't go to my own bed. I walked through the house barefoot, my fingertips brushing along the walls, as if trying to trace our mistake. In the mirror above the hallway console, I caught a glimpse of myself, and didn't recognize the man staring back. Because something in me had shifted. And I knew now. There was no going back. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the kettle whistling. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot what had happened. But as soon as I moved, as soon as the sheets slid across my bare chest and the cool air kissed my skin, it all came rushing back. The kitchen, the kisses, his voice. Just keep it quiet. I sat up, ran a hand through my hair. My body still felt a shadow of a bruise at the curve of my hip, where his fingers had gripped me too tightly. Downstairs, I found him at the stove. Thomas turned slightly when he heard me, and for a beat, neither of us said anything. He looked calm, composed, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the exposed skin, where my shirt hung loose at the collarbone. His lips parted slightly, then pressed back together. "Morning?" he said, like everything was normal. "Morning," I echoed, reaching for a mug. We moved like dancers learning a new routine, careful, practiced, pretending we didn't already know each other's bodies like secrets. He handed me a plate, scrambled eggs and toast. Our fingers touched again, not by accident. It wasn't electric like the night before, but it was no less meaningful. We ate in silence, but this silence felt different, full, heavy, laced with all the things we weren't saying. His fork clinked against the plate. My knee brushed his under the table. Neither of us moved away. Eventually, he leaned back and looked at me. "We can't pretend it didn't happen." "I'm not," I said, setting my fork down. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away, so I looked at him. Really looked. The sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar above his brow, the way the morning light caught the threads of silver in his stubble. I remembered how his lips had felt, how they softened just before. He stood suddenly, his voice low. "Come here." I didn't question it. I just followed. He led me to the hallway, then into the guest room. Her room once, before it became a space filled with forgotten furniture and distant memories. The bed was unmade. His duffel bag still sat by the chair. When the door clicked shut behind us, it felt like a breath held too long, finally released. I moved to him first this time, placed my hands on his chest, and guided him back against the door. He let me. His arms came around me, strong, slow, sure. The kiss that followed was nothing like the night before. This one was softer, lingering. His mouth moved against mine with intention, like he needed to memorize the shape of me in case this never happened again. He undid the buttons of my shirt, one at a time, his eyes never leaving mine. His hands were rough, but his touch was gentle, reverent. He whispered something against my neck. I didn't catch it fully, maybe my name, maybe a warning. But whatever it was, it disappeared in the hush of my breath. We made our way to the bed, half-dressed, fully unraveling. I let him take his time, let myself be still, let myself feel The moment wasn't rushed, but it pulsed with something bigger than lust, something dangerous, something terrifyingly beautiful. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, the air thick with the weight of what we'd done again. My cheek rested against his shoulder, his fingers tracing small, absent-minded patterns along my spine. "I don't know how to explain this," I murmured. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "But I do. To myself. To her." I stared up at the ceiling. What happens if she finds out? He went still for a moment, then said, "She won't. That's not an answer." "I don't have one," he admitted. We stayed like that for a while, skin to skin, the sheets growing colder by the minute. Eventually, I pulled away, sat up, ran both hands through my hair. "I'm a coward," I muttered. "No," he said behind me, his hand brushing gently down my back. "You're just lost." He hesitated. "So am I." I turned, met his eyes. "We can't keep doing this." "I know." A beat. "But I want to." That confession hung between us like incense in a closed room, heavy, slow-burning, impossible to ignore. He leaned forward, pressed a soft kiss to my shoulder. "So do I." That was when the sound of a car engine echoed outside. I jumped, a wave of irrational panic surging through me, even though I knew it wasn't Diana. She wasn't due back for 2 more days. Still, it cracked the illusion, reality seeping in through the seams. I stood and began to dress. He watched in silence, eyes dark, jaw tight. When I reached the door, he spoke. "This changes everything." "I know," I said. And it did. The way he looked at me now, the way I couldn't stop hearing his voice in my head, the way my body still leaned toward him, even when my mind screamed to run. We hadn't just crossed a line. We'd erased it. And whatever came next, neither of us could walk back from it. The house felt colder after he left. It wasn't just the absence of his footsteps, or the sound of the door clicking shut. It was something deeper, like the walls themselves had gone quiet, like the air had changed texture. I moved through the rooms that afternoon, not searching for anything, just moving, trying to feel real again, trying to feel grounded, but nothing felt real anymore. His scent still lingered in the guest room, a soft mix of soap, black coffee, and something warmer. Something that clung to my skin long after he was gone. I stripped the bed slowly, folding the blankets with mechanical precision, pretending it was just about tidying up, not about trying to erase the imprint of what we'd done. But I couldn't forget. Not the way his mouth had found mine. Not the way his voice had trembled when he whispered, "This wasn't I spent most of the day cleaning things that didn't need to be cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, reorganized the spice rack, took every wine glass out of the cabinet and wiped them down. One by one, my hands needed something to do, because if they stopped moving, I'd start remembering what they'd held just hours earlier, and how it had felt too good to be a mistake. When night came, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat on the living room couch, a blanket across my knees, the television on mute, watching strangers live lives that felt nothing like mine. My phone buzzed. A single message from Diana. "Everything's amazing here. So much peace. Love you." I stared at it until the screen went dark. "Love you." The words landed heavier than I expected. She meant them. Of course she did. And I didn't know what to do with that. I hadn't stopped loving her, exactly. But something else had bloomed in my chest. Hot and hungry. Making space in places that once held only loyalty. I didn't sleep much. Just drifted in and out of shallow dozing, sheets twisted around my legs, his voice lingering like smoke that wouldn't clear. In the morning, I poured coffee into my usual mug, the one Diana had bought me years ago. The quote printed on the side read, "Create something every day, even if it's just trouble." I almost laughed. Almost. I took my coffee out to the back step, where the sun had just begun warming the stones. The same spot where Thomas had stood 2 mornings ago, shirtless, pruning the mango tree. The branch he'd trimmed was still there, brittle, dry, forgotten near the garden wall. I picked it up without thinking, ran my fingers along the rough bark, the jagged cut at the end, so sharp, so final. Then I heard it, tires on gravel. I looked toward the gate, heart stuttering. For a second, just a second, I thought it might be him. Irrational, I knew that. He'd said he needed space. Said we shouldn't speak for a while. Said it was better if this never happened again. But I knew, without needing to say it aloud, he'd be back. Because you don't look at someone the way he looked at me and pretend it was a lapse in judgment. You don't hold someone like that, with both hands, like you're afraid to let go, and act like it didn't mean anything. Days passed. Diana came home. Her energy filled the house again, that lightness she always brought, the scent of incense on her skin, the easy rhythm of vacation stories spilling into the room, the quiet affection of someone who had missed me. I kissed her, held her, slept beside her. But every night, I turned away in the dark, eyes wide open, watching the ceiling fan spin, like it was keeping time for a silence I couldn't explain. She asked me once, softly, "Are you okay?" I smiled, lied. We hosted dinner the following weekend. She invited friends, laughed loud in the kitchen, refilled everyone's glasses. Her father didn't come, but his absence said more than his presence ever could. Weeks later, I found it, a small envelope, tucked carefully inside the spine of one of the old art books in my studio. No name on the front, just thick paper folded with care. Inside was a note, his handwriting, sharp, slanted, deliberate. I won't ask you to carry this, but I know I will. Every day. If you ever find a way to paint truthfully again, paint this. Paint us. Even if no one ever sees it. I read it 3 times, then tucked it back where I'd found it. That night, I stared at a blank canvas for 3 hours, hands still, chest full. The brush never touched the surface, because I didn't know how to paint something I wasn't ready to forgive myself for. But I would. Eventually. Because some truths don't get spoken, some loves don't get claimed, and some moments, rare, forbidden, impossible moments, don't fade. They stay, not in photographs, not in saved messages, but in the way your heart stumbles when you hear their name, in the ache behind your ribs when you catch their cologne in a crowded store, in the silence between you and the person you promised to love forever. When you realize a part of you belongs to someone else, and maybe always will. This was supposed to be the end of it, but deep down, I knew it wasn't, because no matter how many times I tried to tell myself it meant nothing,